Hello and welcome to Chatty AF, the anime feminist podcast. I'm Dee Hogan, a writer and editor for AniFem, as well as the owner of the friendly neighborhood anime blog, The Josei Next Door.
Hey, I'm Vrai Kaiser. I'm an editor and contributor for Anime Feminist. You can find me on Twitter at WriterVry or follow my other podcast at TrashPod.
I'm Peter Phobia, and I'm an Associates Features editor at Crunchyroll and a contributor and editor at Anime Feminist.
And today we're taking a look back at the summer 2017 anime season, talking about what we liked, what we didn't, what we'd recommend to you lovely listeners, and everything in between. We have a pretty good-sized list of shows to get into today, but before we do, I wanted to just ask for kind of overall opinions. How did the summer season treat you, right, Peter?
Summer was really interesting. I think it had a lot of shows that had really high highs and low lows. I don't know if any show was like super consistent, actually. Like you get shows like 18F, Ballroom to an extent had really high highs but very low lows. And then like some of the other shows like Gamers and Aoyama, I really liked certain parts, but there was kind of dips. Some of them are like just like, I don't know, like based on my personal taste. Other ones as far as animation, and other ones as far as problematic content. So I felt like week to week I really wasn't sure what I was going to get. So it's been a very exciting summer in that regard, I guess.
Yeah, this is probably one of the first, if not the first seasons where I've been following more than like two shows, so that's been interesting. But I feel like most of the shows I chose to stick with and didn't drop within like 2 episodes, I wound up being very happy with watching all the way through, even if they weren't, like universal highs. So I'm good. Also, I'm very sad because apparently the new Anime Strike is now where good Yuri goes to die, people, and it's depressing me.
Yeah, Anime Strike is kind of a bummer. But the good news is the really good stuff does seem to still get traction. Because I do know there's still some buzz. There's been some buzz about some of the shows on there this past season, so that's nice.
Yeah, that is nice.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of with Peter. In a way, I was kind of disappointed by this season because there's usually a show that sort of jumps out and takes me by surprise and is like just this happy, I had no idea this was going to be awesome and I freaking love it kind of series. And I didn't have any of those this time around. Like the stuff at the top of the list that we felt pretty good about after the first episode, I continued to feel pretty good about. And then there were a few disappointments, which I think there were more disappointments than pleasant surprises this time. So that was a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And like Peter said, there wasn't a lot of consistency. There was one show that I would say was consistently low-key very good, and that was technically a carryover. It was Sakura Quest. And we'll get into that eventually. But yeah, I am also ready for fall. There's a lot of hype in some of the new shows, partly because I've read some of the manga they're based on, so I know there's good source material there. And I'm hoping for another surprise, something that'll jump out at me and just make me very excited. So but before all of that can happen, we need to run down the stuff from this season. So like we did for the mid-season, we will go through the list of rankings that we had posted after the premiere week. And we're going to start with the yellow flags because we sort of watched more of those than we did some of the harmless fun shows. And we'll go through those one at a time. So at the very bottom of the yellow flags list was Classroom of the Elite. Peter, I know you were watching that at mid-season. Did you end up finishing it?
I finished it, yeah. I remember, Vrai, were you the one who said that you thought the whole thing was going to sort of surround around Horikita having to learn that she has to work with others? Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
It was kind of like an admittance that she couldn't work on her own if she wanted to reach A. She had to accept allies. That it wasn't too encouraging what happened to her. I think basically the whole season was just trying to establish what's up with Ayano Koji. Because there's kind of a twist at the end, which I think actually does make him a more interesting protagonist. Because you're really not... I think I've said a couple times before that he's a very unreliable narrator, and it turns out there was a reason for that. The ending was pretty definitive, so I assume it's one of those, and now you can go read the manga kind of things, or in this case I think it's a light novel. But yeah, it was basically just... the limited amount of time that you were given with the show didn't really let them do too much, and it was very fan service heavy. So I think like all of it was just trying to get them to hook you into reading the light novels. I am kind of interested in like Ayano Koji's subplot now, so in that regard, I guess it worked. But I don't know. I guess I don't have too much to say about the series besides that.
Not necessarily something you'd recommend to people, or
probably not. Like I can't.
That's an answer in and of itself.
Yeah.
Would I be correct in assuming from your tone that learned that she can't work alone is tied intrinsically to realizes she has the Doki Dokis for the main character dude? Because that's usually how these shows
she
work.
gets turned into a tsundere at the end over Ayano Koji. But I guess I kind of need to say that it turns out like he is kind of this heavy manipulator type. So,
all right, that's mildly interesting.
Yeah,
choice.
so he was spending the whole time trying to get her to admit that she needed allies, when in fact he was doing that for his own benefit because he doesn't think of anybody as allies. Because I guess I'm not sure if he wants to I don't know what he wants. That's still unclear. But he was basically manipulating everything behind the scenes as it was happening. That kind of thing. Yeah.
So that's yeah.
I guess
okay,
it's if you like.
It's sure.
I don't know. I really it wasn't. I didn't see anything in that show that really made me think, oh, this is really good. I'm sort of interested in like what they're trying to do with Ayano Koji, but like the whole sort of setting that he exists within, and the stuff that they've done with the other characters, and the fact that they spend the majority of their time during dialogues literally just resting the camera directly on a female character's chest. There isn't much else to really go on as far as like wanting to continue with that series.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bummer.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think I'll be going back to it. But thanks for reporting
sure.
in.
Yeah. Thanks for taking that bullet.
I think the next few we're gonna skip through quite a few of these. The next one was Welcome to the Ballroom. I gave up at 3 episodes. Peter, I think you were the only person who was still watching when we did our mid-season. I think Brian and I had both more or less loved it.
So after a convention season, I had a lot of catching up to do because I got like a month behind in all the anime since I was also working for Expo.
Same.
So I spent the last couple weeks just like spending my weekends binging anime to catch up with everything, and I reached Welcome to the Ballroom and just realized I had no goodwill left for that series.
Yeah.
So I and the things I've seen since have made me think that was a very good decision.
Truly, this is the anime that was worth the tragic loss of a human life.
That's dark.
Sorry, what?
The animator from episode 2 or 3, he died while making that episode.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. It does have beautiful animation, so I guess he can be proud of that.
The animation is really good in that show. Well, in like bursts.
Yeah.
So I think besides that, it's actually pretty inconsistent as far as the animation quality, but like just the content is it's so bad. There's no redeeming qualities to the story.
Yeah, I think Lost Thief on Twitter, if people want some takes on it, he's been keeping up with it. So I almost hate watching it, I think, and it has not made me want to go back.
I don't know anyone who's watching it as not a hate watch at this point.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because that first episode was really, really had me excited. But that's one of those kind of disappointments of the season. Oh well. Next was Convenience Store Boys, which was Convenience Store Boyfriends. I always write that down wrong. Which I said was criminally boring. None of us watched it, correct?
Yep.
Right. Okay. And then the next one was Knights and Magic. Peter, you were keeping up with this at one point. Did you continue?
That's one of the ones I didn't get around to. And I guess that kind of... I really got clued into how much I enjoyed certain series based on whether or not I ended up catching up to them. I liked what I was watching in Knights and Magic, but I guess I didn't find it as engaging as even some shows that I dislike in many ways more than Knights and Magic. I like what it was doing. I don't think there's anything bad about the series, really, especially if you're into mecha. But there wasn't enough personal interest that I had to end up getting back into it with the time I had.
Sure, and I think sometimes that just happens. Listeners, if any of you finished it and it's something worth recommending, hit us up in the comments of this podcast post for sure. The next was Altair. I don't think any of us watched that one either, past like the premiere.
Nope.
Yeah, I watched the premiere. I didn't feel like I wanted to watch episode 2.
Okay. Yeah. Again, listeners, if there's anything of value, let us know. But we can't watch everything. We're only mortal. So we'll skip over that one as well. Next on the list is Vatican Miracle Examiner, or as we've been calling it on Twitter, Vatican Bros.
Vatican Bros.
Vrai, would you like to start us off in the conversation on this? Because I know you and I finished it.
I think I did finish the series. I'm not sorry that I finished it. Definitely after that first arc, it kind of became a case of diminishing returns, especially as it started to introduce elements where I slowly started realizing, oh my god, this is a less well-executed version of Descendants of Darkness, an anime from 2005.
And a manga from, I believe, the mid-90s. It's
late 90s, early 2000s.
Bit of a classic of the genre. Which I vaguely remember watching with a friend, but I don't remember a lot about it. I think Vatican Bros, I think they hit us with their wildest arc first, which was maybe not the best way to tell your story. That said, I had a really fun time start to finish. It was pretty consistently absurd. And the last episode was kind of good, which surprised me. There were moments in the last episode where I was like, "This is kind of legit." Yeah, it hit actual human emotions in the final episode, which it had not really done up to that point. It was mostly just a sequence of hilarious jokes, like "Watch out for snakes" and "cocaine bows." Which, check out the Vatican Bros hashtag if you don't mind spoilers and you want to know what I'm talking about.
The police were only invented 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was delightfully stupid. And I would say in terms of feminist value, 0, but I don't think there was anything about it that was actively that would put me away. Like there are no female characters really, like, and that kind of sucks, but it means that there's not a whole lot in that regard. And then there's a lot of really unsubtle gay subtext.
Yeah, that's kind of what ended up bumming me out is that, and I apologize for because by the end of the series I was like, this isn't like what Descendants of Darkness did, an anime I love very much. But and I'm sorry for structuring that, but I think Vatican Bros was very procedural, and a show like this that's very camp and very short run kind of needs to invest us in the melodrama of the characters, not the melodrama of the spectacle, because that has inevitable diminishing returns. But by the end, I didn't feel sufficiently invested in our two main leads to really feel like there was some kind of catharsis of emotional achievement, even if it was totally over the top.
Yeah, they did not do a great job with the characters were pretty flat for the most part, because it was pretty much just them solving the stupidest mysteries you can think of. So, again, it was worth a laugh, I think. Frequently I got a good chuckle out of it, and I'm gonna be real with you. If there's a season 2, I'd be happy. I'd watch it.
I would live tweet season 2. It's a very good anime to live tweet.
Yes, but it's not one, like, I don't think it's not gonna make my feminist recommendations for Annie-Fem when we do our write-up. And it's one of those shows where I'm like, if you like goofy camp, you'll probably have a good time with it, but it's not top tier outside of the first 4 episodes, which I think are a thing of beauty. So yeah, that's where I ended with it. I enjoyed it. It was one of the shows on my list that I think I enjoyed the most, because it was consistent in that it was consistently stupid, and I kind of appreciated that.
There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. So that was Vatican Bros. Next on the list was Gamers. I kept saying I was going to go back to it, and then I heard it pretty much turned into a Love Pentangle? Anyway. And I sort of just didn't have the energy for that, so I never went back to it. Peter, did you end up finishing that one?
I finished it.
Cool. Yeah. What were your thoughts?
Well, for one thing, it was a pentagon that turned into a hexagon, like 3/4 of the way through, with the introduction of Chiaki's little sister. I remember we had concerns that the male characters seemed to have kind of motivations outside of relationships, whereas the girl characters were basically created in relation to the male characters. And I think that was largely resolved in that all the characters are actually only concerned with romance, and that's the entire show, actually. So I don't feel like...
Okay.
Well, I didn't feel like the girls got an equal treatment, at least for over the course of the show, which I guess makes it more forgivable. I personally am not, like, super big into the, like, horrifying series of misunderstandings that leaves everyone kind of crushing on and also distrusting everyone else. But I did find some people who started following the show specifically because of that, so I think that's just a personal taste thing.
Yeah, I think
The
so.
last episode in particular, I think they wrapped it up pretty well in the penultimate episode. The last episode was actually kind of what I wanted the series to be, at least the first half of it, because they sort of spent a lot of time talking about games, and Aguri's kind of like the straight man to everybody else liking games, because she said like games are dumb and they cost too much money, and then everybody has to defend video games, and then at one point they're talking about if DLC is evil or not, and Aguri is pretty convinced that it's bad, and so Amano has to convince her that DLC is actually worthwhile sometimes. So, and there's like a lot of like references and jokes. It was really good. So if the whole series had been like that, I think it probably would have been one of my favorites. Although, in the last half of the episode, they spent like a 10-minute segment. They were at a onsen, and of course they spent the entire time in the girls' side of the onsen, and that, I think, all of the fan service in the show was concentrated into that single scene. It was really, really bad. I don't know why you would put all of your fan service in the last half of the last episode of a show, because usually that I feel like that's something that they use to pull people into a property. But it was probably the grossest scene in the entire show, and that was kind of the majority of the last half of the last episode, and that's how they closed out the series.
Gosh, that kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah, so I thought that series had something to say. It turned out it was kind of just a dumb rom-com, which is fine. Then the last episode like peaked again, and then it hit its lowest point ever at the very end. So based on that, I don't think I could really recommend anybody who's concerned with fan service to get into the show, because guaranteed, if you decide to finish it, it's just going to slap you in the face right before you're done.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Otherwise, like if they could, gosh, I cannot talk today. Could viewers conceivably stop at the end of the penultimate episode and call it a season? Like, did the last episode feel almost like just kind of fun
Yeah,
filler?
the last episode was definitely extra. So you could stop at episode 11, where finally everything's resolved and you get the feeling everyone's going to be okay.
So if you're into wacky rom-coms, I guess that would be a way to do it.
Yeah, just skip the last one. It's unnecessary.
Okay, so that was Gamers. The next two, I don't think any of us watched. Battle Girl High School. Again, we reviewed the premiere and really didn't have a lot to say about it. And then Dive, the new Swimmin' Boys show. I don't think any of us got into that either. No, okay. Again, listeners, any of these shows, if we're skipping over them and you're like, no, guys, why did you skip over that? It was good. Let us know in the comments. So other readers and listeners can know that as well. Restaurant to Another World. Peter, did you end up dropping that one, or did you keep up with it?
I dropped it. I think I pretty much, I think I was on that direction when we first talked about it. It's a fine show. I'm just not into the food stuff, and I think it probably would have been better if it were 12-minute episodes instead of 24.
Yeah, that was sort of where I was at the end of it too. So, okay. Yeah, so we're we're jumping through this harmless fun category pretty fast. The top of the harmless fun list was Elegant Yokai Apartment Life. Right, Peter, I don't think either of you ever got into that one, yeah?
No, that was definitely one that I liked the premiere, and I kept thinking, I should watch that, and then I didn't.
Mm-hmm. We put a little spreadsheet together, listeners, to kind of give each other an idea of what we are going to be talking about today. And I have this one listed as dropped with the number 12 next to it, which is weird because that technically means I finished the season. But it turns out it's too core, and there's a lot of stuff coming this fall that I want to watch more. And I just it never really got me to fall in love with it. So if it had just ended at 12, I would have been like, yeah, I watched it was fine. But since I know it's going to be too core, I think I'm done. I'm not going back to it at this point. It was basically fine. It was really clumsy. Like it kept every time I thought it was kind of trying to do something good, it would do it in a way that was either really on the nose or didn't quite hit the point it was trying to hit. In terms of some of its messages about like the main character kind of dealing with some of his past trauma, or there's like a 3-part sort of finale arc to the first core that is about like a misogyny demon kind of, and it possesses one of their teachers, and there's kind of an interesting twist to it in that the main character Yushi thinks that sees this guy as kind of a victim, and then but everyone kind of keeps telling him that the reason he was possessed was because he was sort of open to these feelings. And so when they Akine, the badass exorcist girl, steps in and like throws the demon out of him, and it turns out the guy's still kind of a misogynist. And so the point of the story is there's these elements of like, you can't necessarily like, not everything is an outside force, and it's more than just like, saying a spell to fix everything. But it didn't do it very well, and it's hard to explain without going into like a lot of detail about why it was clumsy and sort of uncomfortable. But yeah, it was always trying, and it just never was quite able to be what I think it wanted to be. So it was okay. I mean, if you're really into yokai shows, you could do a lot worse than Elegant Yokai Apartment Life for sure. But it's not something that's getting like a glowing 2 thumbs up from me.
It's too bad.
Not a bad way to pass the
Yokai.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't. And again, it has these moments that are kind of nice. And then it just, again, it's just very clumsily handled, I guess is the way I would describe it. So, yeah, it was a fine 30 minutes a week, but I don't think I'm really going to miss it since I've decided not to keep up with it this coming season. And that is the end of Harmless Fun. Now we're getting into the shows that I think we've all kept up with a lot more, and we'll probably have a lot to say about them. The bottom of the feminist potential list, feminist potential being shows that we didn't see like clear-cut feminist themes, but there were elements that we thought might end up heading that direction, so we popped them to the top of the list. And the bottom of this one was The Reflection, the sort of Stanley collaboration with Studio Dean, and I am blanking on the director's name.
Nagahama.
He's fairly well known. Yeah, thank you. So I actually did end up binging that one, but it's not finished because it started 2 weeks after everything else. So the final, I believe it's going to be 12. Don't quote me on that though. I think the final episode will be next Saturday, but we couldn't really wait.
If it is 12, they have a lot to do in the last episode. Yeah.
It feels like it could very easily be 2 core, and I'm kind of curious to see if they end up announcing that, or if it just sort of very quickly ends. Peter, you watched this one too?
Yeah, I just caught up.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
Very confusing. This is one of the when I was speaking about inconsistency, I think I was thinking of The Reflection and 18if mostly. I alternate between hating and really liking the animation, I guess depending upon whether they're putting a lot of effort into it. Some of the fight scenes, especially with Steel Ruler, are really well animated. And they do some good character stuff too, but a lot of the time, other times it's like hard to even tell characters apart. They don't bother drawing faces on them. It's really bizarre the way they want to do it visually.
That comic book aesthetic. I appreciate what they're trying to do. It's just that it's very up and down as far as whether or not it works.
I'm not quite sure what to make of the story yet, because I feel like a lot of stuff is gonna we just got hit with some revelations, and I think but we can't even appreciate the revelations because we haven't been given context for them yet. So it's like we got a surprise about the villain last episode, and we have no idea what it even means, and probably won't until the next episode. So it's kind of hard to get a good beat on it. I found the series very confusing, mostly. I think there was some stuff to talk about as far as Eleanor and I guess Steel Ruler have that kind of a connection in regards to their kind of backstories where they were kind of, I guess they just kind of suffered from really bad loneliness, were left alone. I guess we keep wanting to call her Metal Ruler. Steel Ruler was like homeless as a child, and she just had kind of a bad life, which led to her joining the villains, very Magneto-esque. And I guess Eleanor had a similar backstory, and they kind of, or at least Steel Ruler sees herself in Eleanor, but I kind of don't like how both of those stories are kind of in the context of just wanting to be acknowledged by someone else. Because with the male characters, you usually have some sort of like higher-minded thing that they're pursuing or personal interests, and I feel like the 2 most prominent female characters in the series just want Senpai to notice them, basically.
Well, I do agree with you, and I think that if there were some female mentor characters, that it wouldn't feel quite so much like younger female characters like reaching out towards dudes. I think that's one of the bigger issues. I will say though that iGuy's whole thing is he wants people to notice him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's
for the
like
first
that's
half
not
of the
like
story.
I want a
So
person to acknowledge me. It's I want everybody to know that I'm awesome, kind of thing. I mean, it's still like
yeah.
emotionally codependent, but it's not like I specifically need somebody to prop me up emotionally, uh, which is the feeling that I got, especially from that last episode with Eleanor.
Though he kind of does, like his team really does prop him up emotionally. The team that helps him with his robot powers. I see some reflections
Haha.
between him and between him and the two girls. And I do agree with you that I don't love the way they've been handling Eleanor and Steel Ruler's story the past few episodes. I think they could still end up fixing it, but it does at this point it does feel very much like they just kind of want Senpai to notice
Yeah,
them.
and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I was under the impression that Wraith was a woman, and I thought it was
So was
interesting that the mastermind villain was a female, who I guess Stan Lee was the the sidekick of. But
Yeah.
that I guess seems to not be the case. I don't know if that was just a voice acting thing or if that was something they were intentionally trying to mislead us with. It's kind of hard to tell with the reflection.
I think I think the voice actor is a guy, but I think he has kind of a sort of a higher pitched voice, and so it was tough to tell. Yeah, I agree
Kind
with
of
you
a
there.
Bond type.
And I did sort of, yeah. So yeah, I was a little bummed when the main villain ended up not being a lady because I thought that would have been kind of neat. Especially since the story does kind of be setting up Eleanor as sort of the main kind of origin story protagonist. And I like the characters. I think the show is very confident. It's it's extremely confidently written and directed to the point where when there are kind of these sort of surprise twists toward the end that I don't feel like they really hinted at, I was able to sort of roll with it because I was like, okay, well, you seem very confident in this story you're telling, so yeah, let's go with this. It does some nice stuff in terms of getting a lot of character and plot out in a relatively short amount of time without necessarily feeling super duper rushed. And it's sort of trying to say some stuff about discrimination, but I don't think it's doing a particularly good job.
Yeah, the evil reflected are evil, the light reflected are good.
Well, sort of. The thing they've started to hint at in the latter episodes is that it wasn't so much that people got hit with a light or a smoke, but that depending upon your mental state, you sort of at the time that this event happened, you sort of got those feelings amplified. So if you were really angry or bitter, or you had like these negative emotions, those got amplified by this smoke. Whereas if you were feeling pretty good at the time, it got amplified by this green light. So the idea there is that there's some flexibility there, and that you can help people essentially, and then they would be able to move away from that. I don't know if the show's going to do anything with that, but if they do, that would make the evil good nonsense a lot more interesting and better overall. I think.
Yeah, I think it is a kind of a director versus writing thing because I remember the episode that ended with Eleanor sitting in the park and then Steel Ruler appeared, where it did that like lateral shot and then cut to credits. Like I was like, oh, that was like a really good scene. But then when I thought back on it, because I took a break at that point, I was just like, that was really predictable. So it was like the writing was bad, but the way it was directed made the scene very kind of feel really powerful.
It's really confident, yeah.
And the whole thing, like with the military responses to everything, it's very Marvel in that regard. Like this is X-Men, so the military are just like making the situation worse at all times. In like very predictable and stupid ways, but the show's kind of selling it well, despite the fact that it seems like a lot of American comics I've read.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and again, I don't think it's doing everything it wants to do as well as it wants to do them, but I kind of appreciate it for trying. And I'm curious to see how it wraps up. And it's one of those where if it has a good finale, because I binged like 7 episodes in the last 2 days, and I got kind of sucked into it, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. It's got a reasonably diverse cast. It could be better, but I appreciate that because that's not super common in anime. And so depending on how it wraps up, I could see it end up being a surprise recommendation when we do our final write-ups. So I guess keep an eye out for that, folks, and we'll see how it ends. But clearly, we have a lot to talk about with it, so there's definitely something of value here as far as like a conversation, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's a very unusual series. I agree. It really depends on how it's closed out. Like the whole thing they're doing with the Japanese magical girls, they have devoted a lot of time to them, and they have done nothing. So if there's like now they're in a position to actually affect the plot in some way. So if something good happens with them, then I will appreciate the time that it took building that up. But if not, then I'm like, wow, that was like maybe an episode's worth of content that was just wasted. So it really depends on the ending.
Well, fingers crossed they'll land it okay. If nothing else, it'll be a very confident mess. I can guarantee it will be confident. Yeah. So, sorry, Vrai, we're gonna talk about another show you're not watching. So you're gonna
no, carry on.
Go get a drink, have a snack, pet your dog and your cats, and yeah. So sorry, folks. The next show on the list was 18 If, which, woof. Peter, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, what do you even talk about? It's so
because you're the one who got me back into it, because I'd basically dropped it and you were like, no, there's some really good stuff in the back half, so I picked it up again, and you were right. There's some really good, like, I think some of the best episodes of the season of any show I watched were from 18F. But I think the worst episodes of the season from any show I watched were also 18F. So
yeah, 18F was kind of like the spirit of the summer season, I think, because you didn't know what you were going to get week to week. It could be a masterpiece. It could be the worst trash. Yeah,
I thought Kakegurui was the only show with Russian roulette, but turns out it was as well.
Okay. So yeah, I think I encourage you to get back into it because the Koji Morimoto episode, right? Number 10. Yeah, that was that. I didn't think anything would be able to beat episode 3, but I honestly don't know which one of those two is my favorite now.
I think 7 was my favorite. The kind of Wizard of Oz fairy tale
the
one.
3D chalkboardy one.
Yeah, with that animation was phenomenal. I want to see an entire show done in that style. And I don't think I've ever said that about CG before. But it was gorgeous, and they told a very affecting story in 30 minutes, which I thought which again, kind of like episode 3, I really appreciated. And just in terms of aesthetically, it was, again, 18F has some really good moments and episode beats, and occasionally does sort of flirt with feminist themes, but in sort of a ham-handed way, I think.
But yeah, I think, well, I mean, one of the problems of the series is a lot of the different episodes don't really mesh with the connective tissue. Your favorite actually is one of the ones that I had the biggest problem with. I loved the whole episode, but it didn't really make sense or tie into the actual story regarding the witches. Another one, like probably the worst one, was the Idol episode, where in the beginning of the episode she gets stabbed by a fan like 8 times, and then she's in this dream world. So you would assume she's like in a coma or something like that, right? And she lives out her time as a witch. That was probably one of the worst episodes. But
God, that episode was terrible.
So he like convinces her to turn her life around or whatever, because that's what Haruto does. And she leaves and just goes right back to work. And the stabbing is never addressed again. So I don't know if she just got better. I don't know what happened with that. But yeah, that's. I don't know. It's such a weird show.
There were so many terrible things in that episode that talking about the plot not making sense is like the least of my concerns. There's like, God, there's assault and transphobia, and it's just, it was bad. It was a bad episode of television. But so it's one of those where it's like, I want to recommend like 4 or 5 episodes to people just as like standalone stories, and then be like, you don't have to worry about the rest. Just watch those.
Yeah, the fact that they're self-contained does make it very easy to just allow somebody, because it's like 4 or 5 self-contained stories, and they don't need to watch the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think episodes 3, 7, 8, and 10 were the standouts for me.
Yeah, I'd agree.
The finale was this weird roller coaster, and I don't really want to get into it too much on here, because I think I would almost have to go like line by line to explain why it was so bizarre. But it's like trying to do something kind of empowering and just doesn't know how to do it. So they'd be one line where it'd be like, hey, it's okay to, feel feelings or make mistakes. Like, you don't have to beat yourself up about that forever. And I'm like, cool. And then the next line would be like, times have changed and men are basically women's servants now. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. This is sexist on multiple levels. So it sure was 18 if. If nothing else, I would say, watch those few episodes for sure, because they're very good and they are kind of self-contained stories. But
I think the conclusion was their idea of what feminism was is like catty girl talk, and they said like, Haruto, stay out of this. We don't actually need you. When the thing that drew all of them together was just wanting to see Haruto one last time or something like that. He did become the central figure,
but had almost nothing to do with the finale. It was this weird blend of like, oh, we're doing this for ourselves, and it's like, yeah, but at the same time, are you?
Yeah. It's like, I think they were trying to kind of defy the damsel in distress narrative. Yeah, but like you said, they just had no idea what they were doing, so they kept alternating between the women kind of, I don't know what they were trying to convince the villain of, to be honest, because their message seemed to alternate with every line. I agree. You almost have to go through line by line to figure out what the hell they were trying to say, because the whole meaning of the last episode changes minute to minute, and it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's a big mess, and there's some stuff in it that I really liked. There's kind of because the spoiler, folks, the big villain is like literally Eve. From Adam and Eve. She's the first witch. And so she wants to like destroy the world, and the other witches decide to get together to convince her to stop. And Haruto, the apparent protagonist, really doesn't do anything, which I thought was kind of great. But so there's moments throughout it where the characters kind of they say some things that I'm like, yeah, that's a really nice and kind of important thing for people to hear. Eve kind of blaming herself for being tricked and being like, well, I was the bad one. And they're like, no, you were tricked. It's okay. Like the fault was on the person who tricked you. And I was like, okay, that's like kind of getting into like victim blaming, and that's not too bad. And then again, and then the next line would be some like sort of catty or kind of sexist joke that was very tone deaf. And so I don't know what to do with 18F.
Yeah, it's just a confusing.
It sure
ending.
was a show.
Yeah, it was just like a million signals coming at you from a bunch of different directions. Yeah, it felt really weird.
It sure was a journey. I will say that for it. The middle act was very dull and bad, but it sure was a journey. So yeah, 18F. Don't think I would recommend the entire show to folks, but there are a few episodes there that you could watch as standalones, and I think you'd get a lot out of them. So 3, 7, 8, and 10 for sure.
All really good. Highest recommendation on those 4.
Yeah. So I guess that's the best we can do for that up and down series. Okay, next one on the list. All 3 of us, I believe, finished this one. Clean Freak Aoyama-kun.
Yes.
Hooray! Welcome back to the conversation, Vrai. Would you like to talk?
I don't know if I remember how.
What did you think of Aoyama-kun?
I really liked this show. Like I tend to not watch shonen, almost shonen or sports anymore, because I really don't have the investment in me for long shows. So this was a really nice surprise in that it did all of the things I really like about early shonen. Like, it had a cute cast of ensemble characters with a lot of, character focused comedy episodes. It had an interesting hook that it actually treated respectfully, and then it ended before it could actually do the tournament arc that it was threatening about, and I was here for it. And honestly, I've liked I think the only episode that I found a little bit disappointing was the beach episode. Otherwise, I found it pretty, like, good to great for just about every episode. In terms of, it's a rare comedy show that I actually laughed at, an anime comedy I actually laughed at instead of just smiling now and then. No, it gave me warm fuzzies, and despite the fact that despite spending most of the show on tenterhooks waiting for it to do the thing anime do, it never really betrayed me in any significant way.
Can you expand on that a little bit in case folks are coming into this? Vrai did write a piece on Aoyama-kun for the site for folks at home. But can you kind of talk about
absolutely.
Just sort of, go into that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because the gimmick of the show sounds absolutely horrible from an outside perspective. It's about a soccer team, and their ace player is really, really good because he has germophobia and has, like, structured his whole life around not letting people touch him and that kind of thing, and it's made him very good at the soccers. But it's never played as a joke, actually, in execution. Like, all this takes place in a very understanding world where nobody makes fun of him because of the mechanisms that he's developed to get around his mental illness. It's just a very gentle character comedy that hits a few sour notes, but for the most part is really kind and understanding and has a good, nice cast of characters I like.
I think that covers it. I found with this one a little bit diminishing returns on the back half.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I kind of feel like it peaked around there was an episode in the middle with a manga author that I thought was kind of brilliant. And then I think the one right after it was the one about the basketball girl who the show does do a little bit in terms of fan servicey stuff. So for folks at home, if that's like an absolute deal breaker for you, then it's very minimal, and it's mostly just like the occasional boob jiggle, but it's there, so it's worth mentioning. But I really enjoyed the basketball episode because I liked that character. And then I don't know and every episode focuses on a different character, so how much you enjoy the episode will have to do with how much you enjoy that character. I'm not sure there were really any focused ones after that I was like really here for. As much as I was. So I found the back half a little bit, my enthusiasm waned, but I mean, that could just be me.
Yeah, I think it helps that I binged, so I got kind of behind, so I basically binged the back half. So for me, watching it all together, the episodes, and you're definitely right, like they're from like 8 to 11. Those are definitely the weakest episodes in the show, and then I thought the finale had a really good joke, a really good joke twist that I enjoyed. But up to then, there's definitely, like, there's the boob jiggle stuff, there's the beach episode, which is where I kind of found the boob stuff actively annoying and a little bit, really, are we doing this? And then there's the episode where Aoyama tries to help his soccer friend make up with his girlfriend, which is on the one hand nice because it's the first episode where we see where it kind of makes Aoyama a character and not like this untouchable, mysterious figure that everybody else reacts to.
I really liked him in that one because he turns out he's kind of goofy, and I liked that it was like, oh, Aoyama can be goofy too.
Right, like I liked that, but then it's also at the same time it's like, women are so mysterious. What are you gonna do? Which is kind of sad.
Yeah, it had a little bit of that in the back half, which I think maybe that's part of what sort of tamped my enjoyment of it. That having been said, I still think it's a good show. I like kind of what you were talking about. I liked how it was able to be. It was nice to its characters, and was very understanding about Aoyama's mental illness, and so I definitely appreciated that about it. Peter, do you have anything to add? You've been kind of quiet.
I generally agree with the sentiment. I think the problem that I had with the series, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed it. I think the reason I got diminishing returns was to compare it to another show that was somewhat similar, Tanaka-kun is Always Listless.
One of my favorites.
Yeah. It did a really good job of like slow burn introducing the cast, but it still kept the cast pretty small. I felt like it hit a really good number, and then it just stopped. It stayed there. But Aoyama, it's literally a new character every week, sometimes multiple characters every week, and then some of them you don't see again or they're never addressed again. So it feels like they just keep expanding this cast to the point where you can't keep track of all the characters anymore, and it's hard to really see the ones that you like very often. Because I felt like a lot of the ones I liked early on kind of didn't get screen time anymore because they kept throwing these new characters at me who I either liked or felt lukewarm about.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Yeah, I think when they introduced, and I wish I could remember her name, the basketball player.
Odagiri.
Odagiri, thank you. I remember at that point being like, oh, we have a really fun core cast now because we've got a couple of kind of fun female characters. We've got Aoyama and his teammates, and then like you said, like they kept doing these sort of zero-in episodes. And on the one hand, I like the idea that everybody has a story and that sort of focus on telling all those stories, but yeah, like you said, at the same time, it was one of those, but I like these other characters. Why am I not hanging out with them? So. Yeah.
I really liked Odagiri's subplot as well. I thought that was one of the ones where I really started appreciating how the whole series is kind of outside Aoyama looking at him, and you don't really have access to his thoughts. because in that one it sort of was very prominently put out because everybody thought he had a crush on Odagiri, but it turns out that for some reason or another he's able to high-five her without getting really afraid of germs. So he invites her to stuff so that he can high-five when he scores a goal just like everybody else.
That was so sweet.
So,
oh, my heart.
So that was a really, probably one of my favorite subplots of the whole thing, and I think that was to me the biggest strength of the show. Yeah, but after that, it was just more and more and more and more characters.
Yeah, maybe that's what made the finale so strong to me, is that it comes back to Zaizen, who we started with, and it's like, oh yes, the characters I like. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
It does circle, and there are moments in the other episodes where it will kind of focus more on that central cast, and those tended to be the higher points for me going forward. So, it was a fun little series. I'm not like clamoring for more, but I enjoyed it. Again, I would recommend it to folks. I think I think it did a lot of nice things. So
at this point, more might just mean even more characters, which mean you get less of the ones you want.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. So anyway, I think all three of us pretty much liked it. Again, I feel like we spent a lot of time there at the end criticizing it, but I do want to sort of highlight the fact that we all enjoyed it. So
yeah, very much.
It's a nice show.
It was definitely in my top 3 of the stuff I watched this season.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of top 3, we are in our top 3 shows left on this list before we kind of slide into, real quickly, we'll talk about sequels and carryovers at the end. But these were our shows with feminist themes. These were shows that we said, like, right out the gate, they looked like they were going to be addressing feminist relevant issues, topics, etc. So the one at the bottom of the list was Action Heroine Cheer Fruits. It was on High Dive. We told you at the mid-season that none of us had been able to keep up with it. Vrai, I do believe you get to monologue for a bit here, make up for lost time, when you didn't get to chat below, because I think you're the only person who finished it, or who got to it.
Yeah, I binged the entire thing yesterday.
Well done.
Yeah. It is an intensely okay show. Is I think how I would put it. Like, it is. I am not sorry that I watched it from beginning to end. I wouldn't say, and like, if you are outside of the U.S. and you are already watching and you already have High Dive that you're using to watch other shows because you aren't shackled to strike like those of us in the States, it's not like a poor investment of your time, but it's also not like, yes, go and seek this out, because it's in case any of you, since we haven't talked about it in a long time, it's a show about these girls who these girls end up putting on an impromptu Sentai show, basically for one character's little sister, and then that kind of blossoms into, we are going to we're going to put on a Sentai show to try and save the local theater. It's got more than a few connections with Sakura Quest, at least as I understand Sakura Quest, in the same idea that in this world, every city has like a hero or Sentai team for marketing purposes. The world building isn't really very good, nor is it gone into particularly. And the moments where where the show actually focuses on the club of girls coming together and working on the show is really fun and really endearing, and it did continue to remind me of Samurai Flamenco in a way that I really liked. The problem is that there's a big long stretch in the middle where the show gets kind of lazy and is just a girls in clubs show. It kind of gets saggy and real tropey, and just plugs the very basics of the conceit into, here's a club episode where we do things and there are shenanigans, and it's not very interesting because these characters are all a little bit two-dimensional. It also caught me at the beginning that the first episode had a lot of Yuri stuff in it, and that kind of faded away, unfortunately. The first, maybe 4 episodes had a lot of really strong baity stuff that didn't really go anywhere. And then there are 2 members of the club, the president and vice president, who might actually be dating. They have a speech during the vice president's introductory episode about how, you're so cute, you're my prince, and you're the only one I feel that way about. And then they continue to kind of be blushy and cute at each other in the background, but it's not really a thing that's focused on ever again. Mm-hmm. So it's not entirely bait, but it's also not the strong focus that I'd kind of thought it might be from the premiere. The moments that are nice are very nice. It has a character who is a wheelchair user, and she's treated well and is an equal part of the team. She's the composer and the choreographer, and by the end of the show, they have like clear plans to incorporate her in the show on the stage as well with her chair. So that's nice, but it's not
cool.
like it's an aggressively okay show that had some nice things in it. Like it's fine.
But Vrai, does her wheelchair turn into a giant robot?
It does not. It does not.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Let me tell you what happens in the reflection. Sorry.
Yeah, it cannot compare
honestly,
to Wheelchair Robot.
That's one of my favorite things. It's partly because it's a really good design, and then also Lisa's a great character. So I realized we hadn't mentioned the awesome mecha in Reflection, so I had to bring that up real quick. But
No, that absolutely should be brought up and celebrated. And I mean, that's about all there is to say about Cheer Fruits. Like, the animation is pretty cheap. The designs are pretty generic. And I might have had a higher tolerance for it as well because I don't watch a lot of cute girls do cute things shows, so the tropes were also less tired for me. So it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like if you like shows about cute girls doing cute things, then sounds like it would be a nice addition to that lineup. Like,
yeah, for sure. It is kind of disappointing that like the first episode has a lot about these girls thinking about becoming professionals and emulating like this female heroine that they really liked, and that kind of goes away except for one episode kind of late in the game, which is too bad. But well.
But it was all right.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right. Well, it's okay. That works. So yeah, Action Hero and Cheer Fruits. Okay. Next on the list is Made in Abyss. Who wants to start talking about Made in Abyss?
Please don't make me start. Please don't make me start.
I think we're all a little bit, maybe a little exhausted about talking about Made in Abyss. This is one we've discussed in our Slack group quite a bit, and then it's on Twitter, and then we had a blog post go up the other week about it. So if we sound a little fatigued, listeners, that's probably why. I guess I'll start. I think it is a very well-made series. It's gorgeously animated. It's got a very detailed and rich world. I think all the characters are really well crafted, sympathetic, or if not outright charming individuals who you grow to care about and root for, and that their relationships are very I don't know, believable is not quite the word. I get concerned for them, and I want them to do well and stay together. I was very emotionally invested in this series. I really liked the cast. I really liked a lot of things about it, and I think because of that, I have kind of a hard time talking about it critically, and it definitely does some things that aren't good. Some of those things I think are just not good things. There's a lot of nudity, and I shouldn't say a lot. That makes it sound like they're naked all the time, and it's not. It's maybe 50% of the episodes somebody gets naked. And
it's unnecessary.
A lot of it is unnecessary. Sometimes it feels like it's trying to make a point about this kind of balance between like the man-made and the natural, which is a running theme throughout the series. That having been said, it's overused to the point where it starts to feel skeevy at times. So even the scenes that are honestly kind of sweet and cute, or like well handled, there's this constant feeling of like, oh God, what are you going to do with this? It never really gets. I don't think it ever really like sexualizes or. I don't think it ever really sexualizes the characters. It's just that the sheer volume is difficult. It can be difficult to deal with and to.
I feel like it's never as overtly sexualized as I think a lot of what we're used to in anime, but there are definitely, like, I'll talk in a minute, but I think just on this specific point, it definitely hit a point where there had been, like, by sheer preponderance of how often the plot arbitrarily decides there must be an occasion to get naked, I started to feel like, okay, you're sliding this under the radar, but this still feels a little fetishy. Like, to the point where tropes that would have otherwise been harmless, I started to feel like, are you getting off on this? Are you? Why do I feel weird and skeeved about this? Especially like the scene where Rico is unconscious and Reg Reg has the, oh no, I walked in on the naked girl joke from like a billion harem anime, and I hated it.
Yeah, right. I think you described it once as a beautiful piano concerto where every so often somebody would just slam on all the keys
Uh-huh.
and then go back to the concerto. And that, yeah, I think that to me is definitely how how some of the nudity or there's a lot of kind of how do I describe this? Like bodily functions, I guess. And again, I think some of it comes back to this idea of the story being sort of a harsh fairy tale, sort of a look at like, okay, no, when you go on adventure stories, there's going to be a lot of like pain and sometimes you're going to have to pee and things like that. But again, it's overdone to the point where it starts to feel, like you said, kind of fetishy at times.
Yeah, like,
And
all right, who do I have to accuse of having a piss fetish at a certain point?
yeah, and it's just that feeling of, God, I got this way with, this is a weird comparison, but when I was reading Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, like anytime somebody gets scared, they pee their pants. And I remember at a certain point being like, this happens like a weird amount of times. And like, I get that you're trying to be like, death isn't glamorous and fights aren't glamorous, but you're doing this a lot.
I'm so happy you brought that up because that's something I noticed when I read that book series.
Good. It wasn't just
like,
me.
No. Wetting yourself and knees popping all the time. Everybody's knees popped whenever they did anything. Yeah, but after a while, you're just like, why does this keep coming up? Like, it's like you're not trying to do anything with it, but you're fixated on it, and it's really bizarre.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where when used in very small doses, I think it can make a point. And I think the series, and again, I'm worried that as we're talking about this, it's going to sound like, every 5 minutes somebody's stripping down or peeing their pants or something, and that's not the case. Again, most of it is very good. It's just these bursts that kind of jump out at you. And the thing is, the story is I think it's very immersive and pulls you into this world and you can really get invested. And so those moments like actively throw you out. And so they stand out more because of the fact that the show is so good otherwise.
Yeah, I think I started coming off as somebody who fucking hates this show because every time I'd get on Twitter, I'd end up talking about the things that bothered me because they stood out in such stark contrast. All the things in an episode I really like it'd be 2 minutes and 20 minutes that I thought were really good, but they were so jarring that I ended up laser focusing on them and talking about them. And then people started telling me that I was wrong to be criticizing it all, so I got really stubborn about it.
That's been popular lately, yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't criticize it.
But in general, I did really like this series. There are some... I also really liked all the characters. It has 2 non-gendered characters that I thought were handled really well, and I love them. And Nanachi is my child, and I'm going to adopt them now.
Oh, yeah.
But although it just came down to this issue of the show lost my trust. So it's probably like it lost my trust, and it is probably a testament to how good a lot of the show was that I continued to watch it, even though I no longer trusted it. So using the piano concerto metaphor, I eventually reached this peak where I was so like keyed up and nervous and waiting for the next bang that it became harder to enjoy the music. Especially, and I also think with media, especially media created by men, there is kind of a low level of day-to-day or benevolent sexism that we all shake hands and agree to just roll with because we need to fucking watch something. And because the show dropped the ball in a couple really key places with regards to the nudity, with regards to Riko's agency as the protagonist, I stopped trusting it, and all of a sudden, things that I assuredly would have forgiven in other shows, I started being really, really I started really slamming down on the show hard for because I no longer, it had lost the right to me to give it the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, well, I think also the higher the quality of a show, the more disappointing its setbacks are as well. I think that became kind of apparent with some of the more problematic stuff that rose with My Hero Academia this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The show is so good most of the time that whenever it's bad, it really stands out. And it's more disappointing, too, because you really... if something's bad, you can just write it off a lot of the time. But if you really love something and it disappoints you, that sucks. Yeah. Because... you want to keep engaging with the media, and you don't want to have something in it that makes you fall out of love with it. And I feel like that's probably sort of what you're describing with Maiden Abyss, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Sort of this, well, stuff like, the fact that Rico is the one who can cook on the team, which is fine. It makes sense in narrative because she's been to school and she's learned all these cool things about what's edible down there, and she's the survivalist. But then but then framing keeps happening. That's framing is the problem with the show. But then framing keeps happening where it's like, oh, she's not shown actually hunting or skinning or doing any of the ugly things of survival. She's sitting around the campfire with a pot, and then at the end they're joking about how the Nanachi and Reg joke about they definitely need to keep her along because she's the one who can cook. And I would totally forgive this as just it makes sense in narrative, but also I see what you're doing, show, and I don't like it.
Yeah, there's a good comparison with that to, I think, Golden Kamuy. There's a Ainu girl in that one who's one of the main two characters. I wish I could remember her name right now. But she's the cook on the team, and she makes a lot of really good food. But she catches the food, it shows her skinning the food, and then usually Ainu eat weird parts of the animal, like eyeballs or brains or something like that, and she'll share that with the main character, who's more traditionally Japanese. Like he's like from, I think it's Osaka or something. I can't remember. I probably got that wrong. But so she'll go like, the eyeball's the best part. Here, eat it.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't really want to. So you can see how she is with that framing. You can see that she's a like consummate survivalist, and she knows how to prepare an animal. And will first kill it, and then do all the steps of preparation, rather than just like, oh, she's really nice in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's all I wanted was a little more of that.
I thought they did some, and again, it's been a while since I watched the first few episodes. Obviously, like a whole 10 weeks or something. I thought that was in the early episodes, though, is they would kind of show the characters like catching and skinning and like actually making their meal.
It definitely was in the first few episodes, which is what made it weird for me that it kind of drops off in the later ones. And it's also, I think it's also, to be fair, the biggest thing that made me distrust the show's handling of Rico was a thing that was invented for the anime. And I feel like it's only fair to the manga to say that. There's a big moment where Rico is about to face down a monster, and rather than fighting it on her own or fighting it with Reg, she gives the moment over to Reg and lets him save the day. And that was an anime only edition. And I think it throws off a lot of what the manga seems to be trying to do, which is where Reg and Rico obviously work best together as a team and they need each other, and maybe they trade off moments where they each have the spotlight. But because the anime made that one decision and then ends the adaptation at a point where it's an arc focused on Reg, what we end up with is an anime.
Nanachi, but
fair on Nanachi, but one where Rico is unconscious for all of it. We end up with, just looking at the anime on its own, this great setup where Rico leads us into the abyss, and it becomes like this vehicle to explore Reg and his feelings and how he explores the world, which I genuinely think isn't what the manga's going for. It's just how the framing of the anime ended up kind of creating the trajectory.
I disagree.
Yeah, please.
I see Rico's story existing side by side with Reg's. I think what they're kind of going for, and I hadn't really thought about it in these terms until I just kind of saw a throwaway reference or something on Twitter. Just in reference to the characters and their roles. We see a lot of the cave raiders have these relics that they wield that make them powerful, like it's their weapons. And when you look at the way the story goes in like Rico and Reg's like survivalist training, it's a lot of Rico coming up with a plan and then telling Reg what to do and then him executing it. And I think that in a way, Reg is technically a relic. So I think the show is kind of building it up in a sense that she's sort of wielding him kind of like as a battle master, almost like saying, go here, do this, attack this. This is how we are going to fight this thing. I really like that. And I know the idea of like, the boy being the fighter and the girl not being the fighter kind of falls into some gendered tropes, but I mean, as someone who's not a fighter, as someone who would be more in that situation, more of a planner, I like characters like that. And so, I mean, it doesn't is if there were no female fighters in the series, I would have a problem with it. Or if the series had set Rico up at the beginning as like this like physically ferocious character and then just sidelined her, I would have a problem with it. But I don't think it did either of those because Liza and Ozen are badass ladies. Who we know, and there's that sense that like if Rico can survive to adulthood, she could become that. I really like her character. I like their relationship, and I feel like I have enough stories. I feel like there are other stories that exist with badass female fighters as the protagonist that I don't necessarily feel like not having Rico be that is a problem.
No, I guess the part to the it's not that Rico can't fight. It's that in a show that's only 12 episodes, we lose track of her entirely for almost a quarter of it.
That is unfortunate. And again, I think with Made in Abyss, one of the reasons I give it a little bit of some leeway in terms of that is I know it's an ongoing story.
Yeah.
I know that this is not where anyone's arc ends. That there's still, a lot going on with these characters. So the fact that Rico does kind of get sidelined for a little bit at the end doesn't really bother me because I feel reasonably confident that she's going to come back into focus. Yeah. And if she does not, then I'll come back and be like, well, that sucked. They didn't do right by this very good character. But I find her grit and determination incredibly inspiring. It's maybe especially because she's not necessarily someone who can just, throw fireballs or wield a giant axe. Like the fact that she doesn't necessarily have superpowers and is still willing to go on this journey and overcome some debilitating things that happen to her. I really like her, and she's to me kind of an inspirational character. Like I would love to have the amount of mental fortitude that Rico has.
Yeah, there is never a moment when I stop loving Rico. There are moments when I think that the framing, like the way her actions are framed, the way that it frames what she gets to do, don't always treat her with the respect that I think that character deserves. And part of this is me just looking back and saying, all right, it could be years, because there are only 6 volumes of the manga, it could be years before we get another anime, so to a certain extent, I want to judge this based on, all right, what if this is the only 12 episodes we ever get? What if this is the only 12 episodes anybody ever gets to see? And to that end, it's kind of disappointing, but yeah, definitely, I have heard that the next arc of the manga does feature Rico more prominently, and like I said, looking at it as a whole of what the manga is trying to do, of swinging back and forth between giving each of our now 3 protagonists a time in the spotlight, I think that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I sincerely hope we get more of the anime because I think it's a beautiful production, and again, I'm very invested in these characters. The finale got me to I tear up somewhat regularly when I watch anime. It is very rare for me to just straight up cry, and they done got me.
That
ending, yeah, that was so bad.
Yeah, they done got me. So I mean, and again, it absolutely has problems, and there are definitely some pitfalls I think that you've noted, Vrai, that it could fall into. I don't feel like it has yet.
Yeah, and like I said,
it's flawed. It absolutely has its problems, but there's something to be said for a show that can pull me in like this and invest me emotionally, and that I know that makes me less objective than I could be otherwise, but I really like it, and I want more of it.
Yeah. No, I don't want to be an asshole who says stop enjoying this thing because it bothers me in some ways. Like, I get it. It's very good at pulling in a person in emotionally. It's very good at doing a lot of things. And that's what, like, for me personally, it makes me sad that I can't stop noticing these things in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand
that.
Yeah.
I think there was some give or take in how the portrayals went, because I'm aware of the thing you were talking about where Rico had more of a prominent role in that fight in the manga, but they also apparently cut out some problematic stuff as well. Mm-hmm. For me personally, that what kind of bothered me about the part where she was without Reg for a little while was it seemed like she didn't have the same survival savvy that she usually did. Mm-hmm. Like she falls into a couple traps there and gets into a really bad situation, where I was kind of hoping that Rig would just wake up and everything was fine, because of course she knows what she's doing. I guess that didn't happen.
Yeah, it feels like the only time the anime ever punishes her for being impulsive and exploratory, and it like the only moment where it pulls that kind of give and take between their personalities out of balance. Because like there's no reason for her to get up and move in that moment at first.
Yeah. Well, and then she falls into it. She knew about the creature, but she still fell into its trap and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we can all agree we definitely would watch a season 2, though.
Season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we're clearly all like, I mean, again, I think we've talked about this for like 15 minutes, so we probably should move on. But clearly we're all very invested in it. So it's going to be my problematic recommendation of the season for sure.
For sure.
And I really like it. So I hope we do get more. Okay, we have to move on. Let's get to our top show from premieres, which was Princess Principal. I finished it. Vrai finished it. Peter?
I never got around to it. I knew both of you were watching it, so I will watch it at some point, but I think I'm about halfway through right now.
Okay, well, if you need to go get a drink and a snack, Vrai and I'll take this one. Vrai, do you want to start?
I love this show. I love this show so much. I think it has a few structural problems where it's told achronologically, which doesn't always work, and the ending is a little bit abrupt because it's 12 episodes, and it definitely bit off more than it could chew. It's still a satisfying ending on an emotional level, but it does, because like at least as far as completing an arc for Angie, I was okay with it, because to me the show was always about Angie and Charlotte, and Angie learning to trust people, and so it got me like a big old sucker, and I love them, and I want these children to be happy. But it does definitely have some pacing problems with the plot, but also this anime was made for me. It's got that very I love when anime tackles Western things and Western aesthetics. And I like the spy stuff. I like the sort of cloak and dagger political intrigue stuff. I really liked all of the characters, and I liked that that none of the underage characters had any fan service attached to them, while the 20-year-old is the femme fatale. I liked the character-focused episodes. It's a really cute Yuri romance that I am here for and got all my feelings. So yeah, this was definitely my pick of the season, Moe Same Face aside.
Yeah, and we talked about the character designs a bit at the mid-season, so we don't necessarily need to dig into that. Yeah, I mostly agree. I ended up liking this one. I think if there was any series that was kind of a surprise, it was Princess Principal. And I don't consider it a pleasant surprise because I think as soon as the first episode was over, I was like, oh, I think this is going to be good. And it continued to be. I think it did its sort of self-contained episodes very well. Where it would kind of focus in on one or two characters or one particular mission. I think it had a lot of semi-self-contained stories to tell about these people that were excellent. I wrote an article about one of the episodes, which was probably my favorite episode of any show this season, called Loudly Laundry, which was just like 22 minutes of women supporting each other in the workplace, and it was wonderful. I think where it struggled was in developing an overarching plot. You kept getting hints that there was going to be one, but then there wasn't ever really a clear antagonist. And then they kind of threw in some new elements and forces in the final couple of episodes that kind of came out of nowhere.
Definitely came out of nowhere.
And so as far as like the overall narrative goes, I ended the season going, if there's not a season 2, I feel like my feelings about the show will diminish a little bit over time because, I guess kind of comparing it to Made in Abyss. With Made in Abyss, I know that there's more. So even though there were a few things about this season that I was like, well, I didn't love that. I'm not fully ready to condemn it for that because it feels like the story could very easily remedy those things, and seems like it wants to remedy those things. With Princess Principal, I don't have that, so I do have to look at it as a complete finished product.
Right.
And in that sense, I finished the final episode liking the characters and happy for where kind of the central character arc had gone, like you said, but very much with this sense of like, it felt like the first core in a 2 to 3 core anime, where the first core is about sort of, setting up the world and building the cast, and then the next core or two would be sort of following through on the ramifications of those early episodes and like how these characters react to particular plot points or outside forces or things like that. And so my final feeling was that it feels I kind of feel about this one like I felt about Yuri on Ice, like it feels unfinished. And so I'm sitting here like, that was a great first season. Damn well better be a first season. That having been said, overall I really liked it. Even if the ending didn't quite leave me as satisfied as I wanted it to. Very good. Would happily recommend it. Probably will be recommending it in various posts over the next few weeks. So yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, it's definitely a case where, to me, character investment will always trump plot investment, but that doesn't mean... But you're completely correct. Like, it sets up this political intrigue that it never really goes anywhere with, and then in the finale is like, oh fuck. We have to do something with this to have a big final set piece. Oh god, what do? So it does... Like, it definitely falls down on that front, and for me, it was just because I was so invested in that central romance and also in the ensemble cast becoming like this found family, and I feel like it did those elements really well.
It did, and I don't. I feel like I zoomed in a little bit on the things I kind of was left wanting more with at the very last episode. But again, the fact that I want more says something about the quality of the show and the characters.
Yeah.
I loved them. Even the fan service in this show, it was fine. Like I thought it was kind of funny because it would be like Dorothy like fluffing up her boobs so she could go distract a guard, and I kind of appreciate that kind of cheeky, lighthearted. Fictional characters don't have agency, but in so much as the fictional character can have agency, Dorothy was clearly like fine with this. Like she was kind of enjoying herself.
Right,
and so it did not bother me, and there were moments where I honestly thought it was kind of like a sort of fun, charming addition to the story.
And it definitely helps, I think, that nobody ever touches her. Nobody ever it's always just the boob-tastic dress. She flirts for a little bit, and then they get on with the mission. Like there's never any sense that she's in danger. Kind of thing.
No, there's never that sense. She's always very much, again, in so much as a fictional character can have control, she is very much in control of the situation she is in. So there's an episode later where Chise's kind of talking about Dorothy's like adult tactics, and I thought it was funny. Like it got a chuckle out of me. So yeah, I mean overall I really liked Principallin, and I hope we get more at some point because there's definitely more they could do there, I think.
For sure.
Yeah. 3HC is 2 for 2 now, so hopefully every other season we'll get a fun action Yuri series with really good art direction.
Yes,
I would be down for that, and good music too. Jeez, both of those shows have some good soundtracks. That takes us to the end of the new shows for the summer season. We are definitely over time, but I don't even care. Let's
go.
real quick. We can real quick because I think most of the sequels and carryovers. I think I'm the only person who watched them, so we can go over these real quickly. I'll save My Hero Academia for last because Peter, I know you've been keeping up with that one as well. Just real quick, the ones I watched Saiyuki Reload Blast because I am Saiyuki trash. I love that franchise. I got fully invested in this new arc, and I'm super bummed that I'm probably gonna have to wait another 10 years for Kazuya Minakura to write enough manga for there to be more story to tell. I liked it. I could only recommend it to people who have been a part of the Saiyuki franchise in the past and are invested and like it. If you are, then you'll get a lot of good stuff out of this season, especially the back half was quite good. The animation wasn't great, but Saiyuki's tough to animate because the character designs are so detailed.
Those lumpy faces.
Yeah, well, and they're very detailed, and that can make it trickier to do the animation, especially for a pretty new studio. Like this was, I forget the studio's name, but this was kind of like their first major project, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you are familiar with Saiyuki, if you liked it in the past, 100% watch the new season. Not a lot of, I will say, Saiyuki does not have a great track record with female characters. There is a badass lady priest in this season who I fucking love. So it even gets some feminist friendly points for that coming into it, which I'm happy to report. And that's really all I have to say about Saiyuki. I could gush. Again, I have 10 years of built-in affection for that franchise. But I don't need to get into that here. Other shows. I caught up with Rage of Bahamut Virgin Soul. The first 3 quarters were really good. Were solid at worst and like excellent at best. Just a really fun action fantasy series, with a nice gender balanced cast. And the last arc has been running off the rails. I haven't actually finished it. I'm 2 episodes from the end, watching it with my roommate, and we just didn't have time this weekend to wrap it up. I have not heard good things. If it somehow brings things together, I'll throw it into the write up recommendation post we do. I have a feeling that will not happen, but we'll see. It's kind of going in this direction where they're trying to make me like the guy who was responsible for some genocide, and it started off like an okay subplot where it was like the main character has feelings for like a guy she should not have feelings for, and I'm like, okay, you can do some cool stuff with that. And then it kind of got to the point where I get the sense they want me to like him, and it's not happening. So that's a big mark against it at this point. Again, we'll see how it wraps up, but not.
That actually contextualizes a lot of the complaints that I've been hearing recently. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have not heard good things about the very, very end of it. Yeah, there was a moment about 3/4 of the way through when things started running off the rails where my roommate and I were watching it and getting kind of annoyed, and I was like, "Yeah, nice boyfriend you got there. Shame about the genocide, though." And it's like, yeah, I mean that's kind of a deal breaker. It's I think it's going to end up being like the biggest disappointment of the season, honestly, because the first half was so good and so fun, and I was just so ready to sing its praises. But we'll see. I don't want to condemn it because I haven't actually seen the finale, but I have a feeling it's not going to end well. And then the other one I watched that neither of you saw was Sakura Quest, which was really good. It was consistently good. I think it got better, like almost episode to episode. It improved just as you kind of got to know the cast and got a better feel for what the story was doing. It is. I wrote an article about it actually, so there's my shameless plug. About it does. It's kind of about people who don't get their dream jobs and like what your life looks like after that. And how you can kind of find happiness and satisfaction even if you don't live out that childhood dream of being a famous actress or a race car driver or a singer or whatever. And I really liked that about it. I liked the way it developed its cast in the town and a lot of the little story arcs with each of the characters. There's some really excellent. I don't think there's any flags. Like, I don't think there was really any fan service. There might have been a couple of like questionably framed shots here and there, but overall it handled its 5 female leads who have like this really like nice, important friendship with each other. I think it handled it really well. I think it was a good show. And I was kind of lukewarm on it at the midway point. And now I'm much warmer on it. Clearly, I would recommend it happily to like any of our listeners. I think it's a good series for sure.
Dang, maybe I'll try checking it out. I really wanted to engage with it. I feel like it's doing a lot of cool things just based on the articles I've read.
Mm-hmm.
Yours and also Nick Kramer's as well. He wrote a really good one about how like it's kind of about a lot of economic issues in Japan
mm-hmm.
and what a struggle it is to like live out in these sort of like dying rural areas and like where they can go, what their future is,
mm-hmm.
which I think is kind of like a really important thing for a show to be about.
Yeah. And the second half I think explores that really well too.
Yeah, I definitely felt, even in the few episodes I saw, what you were talking about in your piece about kind of like them hitting their like these walls in their careers and trying to figure out what to do with their lives. So, like, dang, it's about like a lot of really good stuff, but I just
mm-hmm.
could not connect with the characters.
It took a while. I did not. I think it was really not until a few episodes into the second half when I started realizing that I was invested in them, and then the finale done got me. Like, I teared up a little bit at the very end. They snuck up on me, and it was an excellent finale. Like the last episode was. I think a lot of shows this season, even the ones I really liked. Like Princess Principal as an example, had kind of lackluster finales. Sakura Quest nailed its ending. It was really good, and so that's probably part of the reason I'm so high on it at this point too. Is it was just consistent and good and ended well. So, yeah.
Thank you, PA Works.
Yeah, thank you, PA Works. Another great production. Kind of snuck up on me, and I ended up liking it a lot. Okay, last sequel. Peter and I are both watching this one. My Hero Academia. We talked about this at the end of our spring retrospective, and I guess we'll give it a few minutes here as well. Yeah, we're just going to be hopelessly over time. Folks at home, if you need to go get a drink and a snack, feel free. Come back. Come back when you're ready. We'll still be here.
Yeah,
okay,
you kids
Peter?
enjoy. All I know about My Hero Academia is that I am apparently the fancy boy, according to an internet quiz.
Oh, Aoyama.
Aoyama.
Whee!
Yeah.
Aoyama's fun. Peter, I've been talking for a lot. Why don't you get us started with My Hero Academia?
Okay. Well, my reactions to it recently, I think this is where the story has really like come into the part of it that makes it probably one of the best shonen that's ever been written. Although right now I'm catching up on Hunter x Hunter and finally reading all of One Piece, so I'm beginning to see how like heavy those three are. Like those are definitely the top three for me. But My Hero definitely I think wins when it comes to that's hard to say. It's definitely one of the top two when it comes to female characterization. Although there are some shortcomings. If I had to identify three weaknesses to the series, I would say number one is Mineta, existence of Mineta. Then number two is that the female characters don't really get combat roles. None of them really have a combat-related power. And most of them are like kind of support heroes.
Well, and some of them do kind of have combat-related powers, and they're not really treated that way. Like, I think Momo's power of like being able to pull weapons out of your body is pretty combat-oriented.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily treat it in that regard. I think.
She's definitely a strategist.
Yeah,
though.
I think
and
Ochako
she does get her
proven in this arc that she can be a combat-oriented character. I mean, I agree with you, but I also think there's kind of the sense of they don't necessarily give them that opportunity. I mean that one girl can like her skin like secretes acid. That's pretty combat-oriented to me.
she never uses it that way, right?
No, she
I mean,
doesn't.
I like to joke that Momo has Bakugo's power built in since she could just secrete napalm from her body and then use Bakugo's power.
Yeah.
Thus making her Bakugo plus, but she never does that. So I don't know what the inherent difficulties of that are or what. But number three was brought up, I just noticed it recently, it was an article by Marion, who wrote that there's really no female mentors in the series.
Yeah, I read that too. I think that by the time this podcast goes live, that should be on the links post that went up this past week. So definitely check that out, folks, if you're interested. Yeah. It's a really good article.
Yeah, and some of these things do change later on, but I mean, we can only really talk about what is.
Though it is good to know that those things do change. Like I think that's important.
Some of them for better or worse.
Oh,
like
okay.
I'll like. Mild spoilers. They introduce some more female heroes later on, but it's a squad of cat girls.
Oh, of course it is.
So, which is not super positive. I think some of the females get stronger moments. There is one really possibly good female mentor that's introduced later on that I'm just discovering myself further deeper into the manga, but that might not be until like season 4.
Oh, yeah.
I do think that this season gave a lot of the girls their high moments. I have mixed feelings about the Ochako fight, but I think that's definitely a lot more than female characters have gotten in many other of the top shonen series. And I liked Momo's redemption as well. I thought that was a very important moment for that character.
Yeah, it was nice having a character who kind of came in sort of expected to do really well and then struggled early on and kind of lost her confidence because I can relate to that a little bit. That was basically me in grad school. So I appreciate having that character and then sort of the kind of pay it forward attitude of the series in terms of like somebody will inspire one person and then that person will inspire somebody else. And so the way that arc kind of played with that element of the story and that sense of like heroism being something that's almost contagious. I liked it. I liked that sort of support network that was developed there and Momo kind of what's the word? Kind of reestablishing herself as a hero, as someone who can be a hero. Yeah, I think the series handles its female characters pretty well. I mean, it's not perfect, but I agree it's a marked improvement on a lot of series within the genre and even series outside of it, truthfully. And then there's Mineta, and then there's shit like Mineta, where I'm like, why are you even here? He just every time he shows up, it's like it's that piano concerto and the slamming on the keys again. This season I cooled a little bit on this arc. I think I liked the first half of this season 2 a little bit better.
The sports festival's really good.
The sports festival's really good, and then this past stretch had its moments, but I don't think I liked it quite as much as the previous stuff. But I've heard that the arc after this most recent one is also really good. So
yeah, it definitely ended in kind of an awkward spot. I'm glad they hit the where they did in the last episode. I think that's the best possible place they could have ended it without launching the next one.
Yeah, it was a strong final episode, and there are definitely some good moments throughout. It's just that again, sometimes you do have to wade through a little bit of crap to get there. Overall, though, I really like it. I think it is kind of starting to bug me a little bit that the older female characters are all kind of like sexy. And God, there's this really bad conversation in one episode where two of them like get into kind of like this sort of stereotypical cat fight of like a younger woman and an older woman that I just hated. And I remember that ended and I was like, man, this episode is better, because it was like the cold open essentially. And I was like, man, this episode better redeem itself, because that was some shit. And then the episode ended up being like pretty solid. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess you're back in my good graces, my hero. Overall, I really love the cast. I just, again, it's one of those, it's kind of like Made in Abyss, where when those jarring moments happen, you're like, oh, but you're so close to being like practically perfect. So.
Yeah, I think one of the like ways you can really tell a shonen is good is if you can just like immediately identify what its major like emotional narrative theme is. Mm-hmm. And with My Hero, I definitely think it's about being like a good role model inspiration, and this is where I really think it kind of just kicks Marvel Comics and DC Comics' asses, where like especially with Superman and All Might, where it's kind of like they do a lot of stuff with Superman, like not being able to be everywhere at all times, so he can't save anyone despite the fact that he has godlike power. And I felt like that's kind of, I've read some interesting comics that were about that, but with All Might, I've never seen them really focus on how important it is that he be an inspirational figure and inspire others to heroism, so that his influence can be felt where he can never be. That's like in the story. Like Todoroki, Bakugo, and Deku all have in common that they idolized All Might as a kid, and that's why they're becoming heroes now.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of narrative that you have to be a good role model and make sure that the next generation kind of inherits these good ideals from you, if not your abilities, is like a really important thing to say. And I think that is My Hero.
Yeah, I agree. Again, there's a lot of things I really like about the show. So I hope it can keep improving on those, and maybe some of those sour notes can maybe go away a little bit. Overall, I mean, I like it, and it's tough for me to get into long running shonen, and My Hero Academia definitely has the character chops to endear me to it. So yeah,
it helps that it's happening now too.
Yeah, so I don't have to look at like 100 episodes and go, oh boy, how do I get involved in this? But yeah, it's good. Do we have anything else we want to say about that one?
It's good.
Yeah, it's a good show. It's not without its problems. So I mean, obviously, it's a problematic wreck, which is what we gave it last season, and I think that's continued to hold true. But there's a lot of good within that too, so that's good to see. That's the end of my list. Do you guys have anything else you want to say about these shows? I mean, we've already gone an hour and a half. We might as well just keep talking.
We just live here now. No, yeah, like I said, everything I finished, I liked to loved. So that's a win for me, but it does help that I only watched 4 shows, so I can see why you guys found this kind of a disappointing season on the whole.
It was a bit of a roller coaster. Yeah. I would say.
Yeah. I felt like I watched a lot this season because none of the shows really stood out so much that it reflected, like, if there's some really good shows, I don't feel so bad about dropping other shows, or it makes me more inclined to drop those shows because I'm not getting the same emotional return.
Yeah.
But I felt like this season was very lateral, so I ended up watching a lot of stuff to kind of, I guess, fill the vacancy.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction in points. And then there were shows like, like 18F or The Reflection where it was like, well, this has potential, so I'm going to kind of stick with it to see if it lives up to that. And that was a bit of a mixed bag, and not complete either, since we haven't seen the end of The Reflection yet. But overall it was fine. There were some strong showings, I think, so that's nice. And fall is looking to be pretty intense. My watch list might just explode from the weight of the number of shows that are going to be on it. So we have that to look forward to for sure.
It's stacked.
Yeah. So, and we'll be hitting you up with premiere reviews. Gosh, probably by the time this goes up, we will be well into the premiere reviews. So y'all will be able
I
to
will be in
read
hell.
those.
Ugh.
We'll be in hell together.
That's true. I'll have you with me in the trenches.
Yes, we'll keep each other going through the good and the bad. Hopefully more good than bad. I think that's gonna do it for us. Yeah. Okay. That brings us to the end of another seasonal podcast. Then I hope you got your bang for your buck, and we didn't talk your ear off there. If you enjoyed this episode of Chatty AF, we'd love it if you'd tell your friends or leave a nice review for us on iTunes. And if you really enjoyed it and want to help us make more episodes, please consider tossing $1 or more to our Patreon each month. Your support really does go a long way towards making Anime Feminist happen, both in print and in your earbuds. If you're interested in more from the team and our contributors, please check us out at www.animefeminist.com, on Facebook at AnimeFem, on Tumblr at AnimeFeminist, and on Twitter at AnimeFeminist. And that is the show. Thanks for listening, AniFam. Let us know what you thought about the summer series in the comments, and we will talk to you again next week.